I'm here with the Creality Ender 3 Pro 3D printer. For many of you, this will be your first printer. For many of you, this will be your 400th printer. There's a good reason for that. This printer is always attainable for an outrageous price, and today it is still a very capable machine that is being used daily by thousands of 3D printer owners worldwide. And right now, we're going to build one. Okay, here inside the box you should find a big giant piece of foam. Be very careful. It will be form fitted to your printer. You can toss that aside. You'll find Ender 3 manual. I use that term loosely. And immediately you're going to find the Ender 3 frame and the Ender 3 bed. We are going to go ahead and discover all the parts that are nestled in these foam compartments and get them out. First up, right here, slide out your screen. Right here up front, you will find this piece of cardboard protecting the Ender 3 power supply. Wedge your hand behind it and then reach down and slide that sucker up. There you go. Alongside the printer, you are going to find some rails. Go ahead and ease them out. After you get that out, you're going to take the actual machine out. I'm just going to reach in here and gently work it loose, picking it up, reaching down, grabbing the hot end, taking the whole unit, placing it on the table next to you. That will leave you with a box that looks mostly empty, but don't be fooled. You're going to grab your extruder and slide this out, put it on your table, and underneath you will discover it's hiding many more parts. I'm going to take this box and slide it on a table next to my table so I can remove the rest of the parts. Carriage, bag of goodies, another bag of goodies, a spatula, another bundle of rails, a standard computer plug, a stepper motor, and 2 parts to your filament spool. Once everything is out, your table of parts should look like this, and you can grab your cardboard box and give it a toss. I have another table that is blank. I will transfer the parts of the printer to this table so I can build on this table without clutter or confusion. So getting started, take all your parts and put them in a clean space next to your build surface. We are going to use the build surface only for the printer itself. We're not going to build our beautiful printer surrounded by junk. Now we sit with nothing but the base and the bed of our Ender 3 Pro. We are going to open up the manual and follow along. Step 1 is to grab parts 15 and 16. Now they look awfully similar to 2 other parts bundled up in this kit. You're going to grab the ones that look a little larger, and then we're going to separate them from this shrink wrap. Be careful when you separate these, because inside one of them is your Zrod. And the manual calls for 4 M5 by 45. You're going to find those in this bag of goodies. Pop your bag of goodies. Find the bag with the longest screws in the kit. And if you look closely on the package, it does very lightly say M5 by 45. Those are the screws we want right now, and you're going to need 4 of them. You are going to pick up 2 of these. The one with the 2 holes in the bottom go on the left side. That is the side with the memory card slot. And the one with the hole on the top is going to go on the right side. That is the side without the memory card slot. There are 2 holes. Those 2 holes are going to face in. Simply try the Allen keys, find the one that fits, and that's the one you're going to use. To install the rails, I simply take the machine, turn it sideways, and slide it out like this. You are going to look under here where you will find two holes that match up with these two holes. Place this over those holes. Take your big bolts and feed them through. Then take your fingers and just give it a quick thread into that hole. We are then going to do the same thing with the other one. Once they're on with your fingers, you can go ahead and use your tool of choice. I'm going to use a Ryobi lithium with a T25 on it. Where I did not make it tight, just got them mostly in. I'm going to get this as straight as I can with the machine. Then I'm going to use my ball head and tighten it. I don't want you cranking really hard on this, but it's important that it's snug and it's important that you get it as flush as possible. Do the same on the other side. When installing this rail with the two inside holes, I want you to notice there's one side with more space and one side with less space. You are going to take this part with the hole, the lowest, and install it downward and inside. So the lowest hole towards the bottom. Now we've got both rails and we're just going to turn it back straight. Before we proceed any further, I want you to check your bed. So I want you to grab your bed right here. There's a metal plate and give it a little wiggle. If it moves like this, up and down like this, it's too loose and we want to fix that before we proceed. This is a very important thing you're about to learn. On your 3D printer, there are nuts called eccentric nuts and they look like this. When you turn this nut, this wheel will move and it will pull and push to add tension against the rail and against these wheels. To adjust an eccentric, you simply put it over the eccentric and turn it. One way to make it looser, one way to make it tighter. Have a look under your bed and you'll discover two eccentric nuts. If those are loose, there's not enough pressure against the rail and your bed will wiggle. Look in your kit for the largest wrench you have. Came with your printer. Slide it over the eccentric nut and turn it. See the difference? No more wiggle. I'm gonna go in the back and just give it a little bit of a slight just to make sure I didn't loosen that one up. And look at that, it's firm as can be. You'll notice the bed is moving smoothly but kind of snugly, so don't over tighten it. We don't want this bed to become too hard for your stepper motors to move. And there you have it. Your wiggly bed is solid. Next up is your Z limit switch. This is a Z stop switch, also known as a Z limit switch. If you are using a printer without a BL Touch or a CR Touch auto bed leveling probe, you will have one of these. What this switch does is control the minimum height or the minimum Z offset of your nozzle. So as your nozzle comes down, it hits this switch, and this switch stops the movement of that Z axis of your hot end. So the position of this switch is the lowest that nozzle can go. The nozzle can't go any lower, it can't get any closer to the bed, that's it. If this was raised a bit, the lowest position of your Z axis, your hot end, your nozzle, would be slightly higher. As you can see, getting this thing set and making adjustments to this thing is not ideal. When you use a probe, such as a CR Touch or a BL Touch, this switch is removed, and instead you are using your firmware to control the Z offset, the Z height of your hot end, your Z axis, your nozzle. In other words, you could take your firmware adjust that Z offset to lower the nozzle 1/100th of a millimeter, 1/10th of a millimeter. You can go into the negative until it's even crashing into the bed. So that allows you to get much more accurate and make much more refined adjustments to get the Z height of the nozzle to the bed exactly how you want it. Whereas if you're relying on a physical switch, that ability is severely limited. And that's why it's always ideal to use an auto bed leveling probe to give yourself that full control using the firmware where you want that Z height to be. Let's install this thing. You will notice on the inside of the Z limit switch, there are these two rotating rectangular nuts. These ride inside this rail right here. And when they twist, they become sideways, which locks them in place into these rails right here. So we are going to make sure they face straight up and slot them into our rail. Take your Allen key, snug it up. And there you have it. Your Z limit is installed. This is the lowest position your nozzle can go until we move this at another time. Now that we've got that little annoyance out of the way, let's move along to much more significant components, the power supply and the screen. Let's go ahead and look at your printer head on. Do you remember the two holes that we placed on the inside earlier? They're going to come into play now because that's where you install your power supply. We're going to take our screw and stick it through the hole from front to back. Starting with the first one, take your Allen key and stick it into the bolt, pushing it forward. Line it up with the top hole on the power supply and give it a turn. Now your power supply is in place, and we can do the same with the second screw. Pushing it through, put your tool on it, and give it a turn. Now we snug them up. How exciting, we now have a power supply installed on our Ender 3 Pro. If you want, you can also make this your first electrical connection. Turn your printer to the side and you'll notice this cable sticking out of your power supply. Lean the machine back and locate the matching plug on the bottom. Grab it from its base and feed it up so it's not entangled at any wires. Take the power supply cable and feed it through the gap in the leg of your printer and connect it. And you've now connected the power source. Stand it back up and straighten it out. Next up is very exciting. We are going to install the screen. This is a knob screen. You probably think it's very old and you're thinking I should upgrade this. But right now, today, knob screens are still the preferred screen, even in current 3D printers, due to their compatibility with multiple firmwares from outside sources. To install the screen, we're going to look to this section right here and these pre-threaded holes. In your bag of goodies, you'll find a bag with 2 screws in it, and they are M5x8. It will say it in little black marking on the bag itself. Again, we're going to use our Allen key and we are going to install 2 of them right here in these diagonal holes. Placing the screen against the plate, you will see that the screw lines up with 2 holes on the plate. Press the screw onto your Allen key, line it up, and then feed it in and give it a quick turn. Do that with the next screw. I like to stick it on first and then guide it in, give it a turn. Now we're going to snug them up. Before you snug it up, have a look inside here. Make sure it's nice and straight and looks good the way you want it. And there you go, you can see it looks nice and clean. And your Ender 3 now has a screen. There is a protective film on the screen. If you trust yourself, you can go ahead and peel it off. Next up is the stepper motor and your Z-rod. Your Z-rod is in a black sleeve. You are going to gently slide it out. Try not to handle it too much and place it on a clean surface. I'm placing mine on a piece of cardboard that came with the printer. Look inside your kit for a bag that says M4 by 18. It has 2 black screws in it. I'm turning the printer around so we can look at the back. Your stepper motor and Z-rod are going to go right here. First thing you'll notice is these 2 screws right here. They will match up with the 2 holes on your stepper motor bracket. Place the motor right in front of it. Take those 2 screws and your Allen key and install them. When installing these 2 screws, if your bed is in the way, don't be afraid to take the bed and firmly push it forward out of the way. Once your stepper motor is firmly in place, you can grab your Z-rod and slide it down into this hole. Take that same Allen key, put it in the top nut and tighten it. There you have it. Your Z-rod is installed. The next step is a bit of a pain in the neck, but it's super important. So we're going to take our time and install our Z, which includes our extruder and our Hotend. You will remember the second bundle of rails that we had earlier. Now we're going to use them, so open them up. You are going to find part number 18. It's this one. You can tell which one it is because it has larger holes cut out, one on each side. And then this crazy assembly right here, which contains 2 stepper motors, a stop switch, and your extruder. This can be super confusing, but I need you to understand the orientation, which is right here. Looking from the front of the machine, this is the front of this contraption with your extruder in the back, the QR code in the front, the switch facing that way, and your wheels right here. Take the rail with that big hole and the 2 screw holes, turn it over and slide it into place. Let's take a closer look. The bolt goes into the hole. Into the hole. I would take this component here and feed 2 bolts through it. Place them where they belong. Take your key, stick it through until it locks into the back of the bolt. Then place your bar and twist it into place. Once it grabs, go ahead and do the next one. Cinch them up. When you're done, flip it over, and this is your component. Right here, you'll see the 2 screws we just put in. Next up, look for a small bag with parts that look like this. You're going to take one of these couplers. In the front of your extruder is this gold threaded hole. Take this coupler and screw it in there. It does not have to be terribly tight, just snug. While we are here, I'd like you to look at the tension spring. Notice it's not all the way in. A lot of people are installing extruders and they're tensioning this spring too tight by moving this screw in too far, making this spring too tight and this handle too snug. Notice that it's out a couple of millimeters. That's how I want you to leave it. Time to install the other side. You are going to look for this, and you are going to look for this. The first thing we're going to do is take this piece right here and note the orientation of the bar. I want your extruder facing up and towards the rear. I want this right here with the wheels facing towards the rear as well. If you spin the whole contraption around, you'll notice this is where the other large hole comes into play. That hole fits into this bolt right here. Now we go ahead and take two M416s and slip them into place. We just did this screw here and this screw here. And now we turn this around, and this is what it looks like. This is now our Z, which will ride up and down the rails on these wheels. Like this. You'll see my printer is back on the table. We're going to install our Z and our hot end to it. We are going to move it aside. And as I'm sure you've already noticed, the hot end is attached to it. So we're going to go ahead and keep that with us right here. Taking our new contraption, we are going to take our hot end and position it like this. The fan is the front, the nozzle is the bottom. We will then take the wheels and this rail and marry them. To do that, I am going to first loosen the two screws I installed before, which gives me a little bit of play. Once the hot end is on, I'm going to retighten these screws. If you'd like, you can reverse the order, keeping this off and putting the hot end on first. Now that our hot end is on, you can turn it around and see that it looks like this. Here is your hot end. On the underside, you'll see another eccentric nut like we talked about earlier. If you find this hot end is wobbly, simply take your wrench, put it over this nut, and tighten it until this hot end is stable and not wobbly. Then we can proceed. Now that we're here, the next thing you're looking for is this and your Z belt. Doing this part can be a little tricky, so be patient and take your time. We're going to go ahead and install this. It has two of those rotating nuts that we talked about earlier. You are simply going to take these, straighten them out, flip them over, and slide them here into the rail. Once they're in the rail, you're going to turn them by tightening the bolt. Once they turn, you continue tightening the bolts and they will pull against the inside of this rail and secure the part. If you find that they're not really spinning properly and locking into place, just loosen it up and give it another go. It'll look like that. You'll notice that the wheel is in line with the rail. This is where we have lots of fun putting this belt on. The first thing I want you to do is understand how the belt works. The belt is going to feed between these rails, go around that gear, up and through this rail, under the wheels, and then around this wheel right here, where ultimately it hooks into these slots to secure it to the hot end. That belt then pulls and pulls back and forth to control your hot end's movement. The directions for this are really poor. To put it on, we're going to start by hooking it onto the first slot. The teeth go down towards the rail. We slide it under. We curl it upward. And we feed it into the slot. Can you see what I did there? All I did was curl it upward and slide it into the slot. You'll see this is how the belt works. It pulls the hot end from both sides. We'll then take this belt, wrap it around the gear, and bring it up to the other side. This part's interesting because you'll notice the wheels are in the way. We're going to take the belt and we're going to push it down into the slot, and then we're going to move the hot end over it. And there you go. Now that this side of the belt is in place, we will focus on the other side. We'll take this piece right here and feed it over the gear. Tooth side down, okay? Tooth side down. And then wrap it underneath the bottom. Once we're down the rail, we will take this piece again. We will bend it upwards like that, and we will simply slip it into the slot on the hot end. Now you've got the belt hooked into the hot end on both sides. And as the steppers turn and push and pull this belt, your hot end moves left to right. Or more appropriately, this way. Alright, now that you've survived building your Z, which is your extruder, your hot end, your rollers, your Z belt, and 2 stepper motors, we're going to install it on the printer's frame. This is mega important. Behind your extruder, you will see these 2 screws where your Z bar goes. We're going to loosen them just a little bit. You'll see there's a little bit of play. When we're done, we will tighten them just a tad, but not too much. We are actually going to leave just a tiny bit of this play. You're going to grab your Z assembly, and we are going to use these wheels like a roller coaster to slide it down these bars. However, remember that hole we just worked on? We're going to be very careful and work that in to this Z-rod. I'm going to take the wheels and put the bar in between them, and then ever so carefully push it down, and you'll feel it clink into place. And you're going to work the Z-rod into that hole and turn it. This will slowly work the entire assembly down over the rails. You can see your entire Z assembly working down. The next time this print head moves, it will be under the power of the printer. You can now return to these 2 screws, and do not make them tight, just close them up a little bit. Later on, if you feel like this is binding and not moving smoothly, come back and just loosen these the slightest bit. Alright, next up is the final rail. It has 2 holes on each side. You're going to place those holes vertically. Grab yourself this little bag. It says M5 by 25 on it. They're large screws that look like this. One side has small holes only. One side has large holes above the small holes. You're going to place it with the large holes up, and that allows the head of the bolt and the washer to fit down into the rail. You can see the washer and the head of the bolt fit inside the rail thanks to those little bored out holes. Now, if you'd like, you can find 2 of these in your bag and place one on each end. This is strictly for cosmetics. Now it's looking super complete, but not quite yet. We have to install the filament spool holder. So we're looking here over the extruder, up to the top rail, right there. That's where we're going to do it. The first thing we're going to do is take this and unlatch it. Take the same part and stick it right in there. Notice the foot is up. They are facing in opposite directions. Grab the piece we just took off and lock it into place. There you go. Just twists on, that's all. Now we are going to face this arm towards the back of the printer and this foot towards the front of the printer. Just like this. They don't give you an exact location to install it, so I simply slide it over a bit and put it on this general side of the printer. Not all the way in the center, but more over to the side. Because Creality likes to mix things up, these have their locking bolts in a bag instead of pre-installed. So find that bag and take 2 out. They look like this. You are going to place the 2 screws right there. Press your fingers on them and turn it over. You are then going to take these locking bolts. They have 2 sides to them. One has a little bit of a raised portion. Place that raised portion down and screw it onto the bolt. Same for the second part. You will then again make sure they're straight, that they are facing the same direction as the rail so that they slip into the rail. Take your Allen key and tighten them up. Doing that will turn this screw and cause the nut underneath to rotate and become this way, locking the spool holder in place. And that brings us to one of the most important and potentially scary parts of this build. We are going to connect everything. However, there's no need to be afraid. This is actually quite easy, and we're going to do it right now. The first thing we're going to do is look for this colorful cable. This is the cable for your screen. You can do this by simply looking under the screen. If you look under the screen, you'll see there are 3 connections. And simply plug it in to the port labeled EXP3, or just plug it into the furthest port from the knob on the left, and that's EXP3. It's notched and it'll only fit one way. The notch goes up. I turned my printer on the side just to make this easier for you. And there it is. Looking at it from the screen, the plug is right here. It's the furthest one from the knob. Next up is to connect our Bowden tube. So we're going to zoom in right here and focus our eyes on the coupler for the extruder. The way a coupler works is there are teeth in here, and once the tube is pressed into the coupler, those teeth will grab the tube so that it can't come out. You are going to take the tube and in one clean shot, you are going to press it firmly forward. Don't overdo it. It's a very small movement, and we do not want to kink or bend or damage this tube in any way. You'll know it's in place because if you play with it a little bit, you'll see it does not move at all. Once you have it in place, find this little blue guy and slip it between the plastic and the metal. There's a little tab. It doesn't necessarily matter which direction it faces. Just squeeze it in between the two, and it will hold the gap between this ring and this coupler. To remove the Bowden tube, technically you will remove this clip and depress this ring to release the teeth. But I wouldn't count on that working, and I'd also keep spare couplers in your collection. There's also a coupler on the hot end, but it's already installed. However, what isn't installed is the blue locking nut. So again, you're going to find something that looks like this. It's actually bigger than the other one, so find the bigger of the two and simply push it between the plastic and the metal. There you go. You've secured your Bowden tube in the hot end as well. But we're not done yet. We've got this octopus of wires to connect. The first one we're going to connect is labeled E for extruder. Look to the side of the machine and you'll see the extruder's connector right here and the stepper motor's connector right there. This wire has to reach very high up the machine, so I want to make sure it's not looped underneath any of the other wires behind this machine. So just free it up if it is. We are now going to take the wire labeled E and plug it in to the extruder. It only fits one way, it snaps in gently. We are going to take the one labeled X and plug it in under here. We now have these two connections. Look over here just a little bit and you'll see another sneaky connection hidden in there. We'll take this little tiny cable labeled X and plug it in there. Again, it'll only fit one way. Be gentle, but you might need a little assistance encouraging it to go in. Again, that is the connector for the stop switch on the hot end. That tells the machine that the hot end can't go any further in that direction. Speaking of switches, lower your eyes and you'll see the Z stop switch that we talked about earlier. But where's the cable for it? It's already there. There it is, sticking underneath the printer. This plug is labeled Z. Simply stick it under here and plug it in. Again, it only fits one way. It should be very easy to plug that in. After that connection, turn the printer around and you will spot our final connection. That cable will be hiding right here under the machine. Simply find it and bring it up. Be very careful. This cable might be too short and you might have to work it very gently. And there you go. It's a little snug, but it's plugged in. That's the final physical connection of this printer build. All that's left to do is plug it in and turn it on. However, there's one more critical component that you must check on any power supply, whether it be a computer or a 3D printer, and that is to make sure it's switched to the proper voltage. We're going to look right there. It should say 115, but you'll notice it says 230. That's the wrong voltage. So we need to take a tool, such as an Allen key, get it inside this little wedge right there, and push it down. Now you'll see it reads 115. That's the proper voltage, and the machine is ready to use. We are simply going to look at the screen side of the printer, where the power supply is, and find that plug right there. It's a standard plug that you might find on your home desktop computer. Plug it in, then plug it into the wall. Before you switch it on, I want you to take note of the micro USB memory card slot right there, and this USB reader that came with your printer. You'll notice inside it is a micro USB memory card. Stick it in that slot, pins up. Place it gently till it feels okay. Then click it in. It'll click and stay in place. You push it in gently again and it'll come out. Click to stay in place. Now it's finally time to turn it on, and we're going to do that right now. Put your finger on the red button and switch it on. Your screen should look like this, and you should hear all kinds of fans running. To do a basic printer test, we are going to home the hot end. To do that, click the button, Go to Motion by turning the knob. Select Motion by clicking the button. Turn the knob again. Turn it to Auto Home. And then click the button. And there you have it, a successful home. You will have seen the various stop switches that we worked on in action, as well as the belts that you installed and the stepper motors that you plugged in. Everything looks good. All that's left to do is tram the bed, and we will do that in another video. I strongly recommend installing a CR Touch on this printer. I am going to do that in another video, but even if we don't, there is one remaining task, and that is to tram this bed manually. We will also do that in another video. For now, we have successfully built an Ender 3 Pro 3D printer. You're watching 3D Rundown. I'm Greg Adventure, your instructor at 3drundown.com, and building this Ender 3 Pro 3D printer was today's adventure.